All right, everyone, we should be live. Welcome back to the Vays YouTube channel. And man, I can't believe I came out of retirement of doing Bitcoin content. But it was great to reconnect with Jimmy Song once again. And we did an episode yesterday. We may or may not mention parts of it on this one. It's completely independent. Now we're joining by Luke Dashjr and Bitcoin Mechanic of Ocean Mining Pool. Luke will come to us with audio only. You guys should already be seeing Mechanic, but Luke is on with us. And welcome, guys. Mechanic, you've been on this podcast before. Luke, you might have made an appearance or two. Everyone knows Jimmy's song. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna add everyone's, info in the video description for historical purposes. Jimmy needs no introduction. Mechanic, you probably don't either, but why don't you, reintroduce yourself, then Luke, and also talk about, mention where you guys are working with Ocean Mining Pool, and then we're going to jump in to talking about knots and this, I don't even want to call it a debate, right? It's quasi-debate. I just want it to be a discussion so people are informed what is going on between Bitcoin Core and what the initiative to, I guess the anti-Bitcoin Core initiative that is happening right now. All right, Mechanic, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be back. Been a long time. We used to do the news show together and stuff. Oops, I'm just loading up the YouTube stream so I can read the chat. It's been a contentious period in Bitcoin. Another really heated situation. It's been a lot of drama, but it's not about nothing, right? So I see this is an intro on what's going on rather than me. I don't really know what I do here. I just sort of Ocean came along to try and help decentralize mining, and it's done a really good job of it. The software exists, people are using it, it's getting adopted. We launched that a couple of years ago, and been working with Luke on that for a couple of years. And Bitcoin is going through some turbulence at the moment, and we'll start sifting through that in this pod.
Yep, I'm gonna just open up the Ocean Mining Pool. I was there for your launch. I've been a supporter of Ocean Mining Pool. Had some hash rate on Ocean Mining Pool. We're gonna talk about this a little bit as well, and your efforts in mining decentralization, how that's going. Hopefully, we have time for everything. Luke, you want to say a few words? You are with us. People aren't sure you with us or not because you don't have your camera on. But Luke, let's hear your voice, man.
Yeah, I'm here. Probably important since you brought up Ocean to point out that Ocean and the whole spam war is completely separate. Ocean is not a typical mining pool. We don't make the blocks usually. Our miners do that, and we just serve to help coordinate the miners. So it's really our miners that are making the decision about what they put in blocks and how they do that.
Yep, and I do have multiple streams about the Ocean Mining Pool on this channel. I think that was the last content I did that was Bitcoin related. All right, where do we begin? I don't know how much. I know, Luke, you were watching yesterday's show live. Mechanic, you tried to listen to it on 2x speed. In my quick summary, I thought Jimmy and I brought up very good points and criticism of Bitcoin Core, and Adam, unfortunately, did not do a very good job in explaining Bitcoin Core's position to the layman person that's trying to decide what kind of nodes to run. We will try and bring on like maybe a regular user that, and try to find out why some people are supporting Core v30. But do you guys want to comment on anything specifically that was said in yesterday's podcast? If not, we just jump in. And I think I'm going to close the windows behind me because there's some construction. So go ahead.
Well, the vast majority of what Adam was saying was simply false. So I don't know that there's any reason to really repeat it and get into the weeds on it.
Okay.
You got
How
the
about
weird screen
we?
right now. Can you turn on the cameras again? I'm just looking at this,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
goofiest picture of me I've ever seen. That's all.
Well, you know what the problem was? I can explain that. I wanted a picture with you facing forward, but unfortunately, there was a giant microphone blocking half of your face in every picture online with your face facing forward. So that was the best option I had. And I had
Dude,
only 5
there's
minutes
AI
time.
for this stuff, Tone. How behind the times are you? Oh, geez. How about we start with this? Like from your perspective, what is it that happened? With this pull request, and sort of give us the narrative in a way that the watchers of Tone's channel can sort of understand. So assume they don't really know that much about this controversy, and sort of give us your take on what's actually happened, what the pull request was, and why you've been opposed to it.
Who's that aimed at, me or Luke?
Either one of you.
Go ahead, Luke, because you're going to answer with 2 words, and then I'm going to ramble
Yeah,
for half an hour.
also, Luke, feel free to go technical, and then mechanic could relay it to the idiots like me.
I'm not sure this one can be done with 2 words. I mean, for the first, 13, 14, 15 years of Bitcoin's life, the problem of people spamming the network has always been dealt with policy spam filters. 2023, more mainly the inscriptions people figured out a way to abuse Taproot to bypass those filters. Core, I mean, I put together a patch to fix the spam filters in 2023 as well. I was going through some tough times, so I wasn't able to get it as quickly as I would have hoped. I would have thought other developers would have, but they didn't. And that pull request to fix the filters and address the bug was basically railroaded by spammers and deemed too controversial to merge. And then this year, somehow out of the blue almost, Peter Todd started pushing a change to remove even the existing spam filters that were working. And that was obviously controversial too, but it got merged and maybe a week ago, released in Core 30. And that removes the existing spam filters. It essentially defines a standard way for up to 100 kilobytes of data storage in Bitcoin as like a supported use case now. And not only does that make the spam problem much worse, even if they don't use op return because it's cheaper to exploit the inscription bug, it's an endorsement of data storage. So people are going to be abusing the inscription bug more too, which is why you see people saying blocks are going to be 4 megabytes of spam, because even though op return can only do 1 megabyte, the spam in general is going to pick up. It's not going to just be op return. Probably won't be. But it also opens the door to illegal data, CSAM, that is like, if you even have it on your computer, you can go to jail, or in some countries even be executed. And so now, if you want to run a full node and you have to download this CSAM and store it on your computer and distribute it to other people, all of a sudden this is going to be a huge barrier to adopting Bitcoin full nodes. And the majority of the network needs to be using full nodes for Bitcoin to function as a decentralized, secure system. If we don't have the majority using full nodes, we're vulnerable to miners adding inflation at any time, basically, to the currency. So this is a serious problem. Even if it wasn't a major legal problem, nobody is going to want to be distributing the CSAM stuff. If you don't know what the term means, it's basically child pornography. Nobody is going to want to be participating in this, even if it was perfectly legal, even if there was exceptions made for full nodes. So this is going to impact Bitcoin adoption, whether it's legal, illegal, or whatnot. But it is usually very in almost every country very strongly prosecuted, and there are no exceptions for full nodes. Any criminal lawyer will tell you that. But in any case, we already have an uphill battle getting, I looked just the other day, someone posted on Twitter that his sister is never going to use a full node for whatever technical reasons, and we are having an uphill battle getting people to use their own full nodes. If that's why I would say like there's single, maybe low double-digit % probability of Bitcoin success. But if we have the CSAM issue, it's basically a lost cause at that point.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Mechanic. You wanna add to that, because like if the I mean, we could start with the CSAM topic. I wasn't gonna start off with that topic. I saved it for the very last question for yesterday's video, but we can kick off with that if that is your most important gripe with this. If that's like priority one, we can start off here and then move on to other stuff.
Yeah, the trouble with this is there's so much context, and it's really hard putting it like into just summaries where I'm not saying something that I know contradicts my position somewhere else, because this is like always more than one thing at once. Spam filtering and rate limiting are great and they're very effective, but there's been loads of op returns in absolute value, not in percentage terms, thanks to a filter. So I keep posting this chart where you have loads of op returns historically in the blockchain, all the way up to 80 bytes or 83 bytes. And there are still tens of thousands of op returns bigger than that get around the filter, but they're less than 1% of all the op returns. And that is due to the filter. But the thing is, the status quo in Bitcoin has been, we filter out stuff en masse. Overwhelming majority of the nodes on the network filter out op returns bigger than that. And that's why you don't see them. And people say, well, it doesn't make any difference because you can get around it. I'm saying, but it does make a difference in practice, because getting around it means using a third party like Mara that runs a service called Slipstream, where you have to submit to a trusted third party that is going to gatekeep what gets in the chain. And they openly have terms and conditions, and they make it so that if I submit something that's a giant JPEG of something inoffensive or some scam coin token that I'm launching, yeah, they'll probably put it in the chain. But obviously, if it's malware or illicit content or illegal pornography or something like that, then they won't. So when people say technically we can get big op returns in the chain already, I'm saying, all right, but if you want to attack Bitcoin by putting egregious content in the chain, which has never happened before, people have put in links to nasty stuff. People have put in stuff that you might have to reassemble in some contrived way to turn it into nasty content. But no one straight up just put CSAM in the chain in a contiguous format. That hasn't happened. And even though it's technically been possible via the consensus rules since op return became a thing, if you wanted to do it, you didn't have a relay network that would let you. You had to go to a miner out of band and say, can you put this in the chain? And they're always going to go, well, what is this you're giving to me? And then they're not going to commit suicide by putting it in the chain. They have no incentive to do it apart from some transaction fee they could charge you. So this has been my argument with people that keep saying overly abstract statements. When I get into the weeds and I say, how would you do this attack before Core 30? They always say, well, an economically rational miner is incentivized to include all consensus valid activity. And I'm saying, no, how would you do it? What are you gonna rent the hash rate and mine a block with this stuff in the chain? Or are you gonna pay Mara to do it? Because they're gonna say no. How are you gonna get it in the chain? Technically, you could do it. You could rent the hash rate, or you could spend, I guess, a whole year or more trying to mine it into the chain yourself. And then everyone's going to see what? Your block containing this malicious content that comes from an unknown miner when 99% of all the blocks are well labeled and we know where they come from. And this was the point. You have spam filters and you have centralized mining. And both of those mean everything that gets in the chain is non-controversial. It's all financial activity and it's all scam coiners getting around filters. But no one actually was able to dump in contiguous arbitrary data up to 100,000 bytes or 1 megabyte, let's be honest, because that is the real limit of what you can do with op-return. So I always have these conversations where I'm saying to people, how would you have done it? And they never come outside of the abstract. With an economically rational miner would put it in. I'm saying, no, they wouldn't, and they haven't, because the incentive's definitely there. So I'll comment on a couple other things Luke says. What he started out with in his opening, argument there was about, well, it sounds like an argument from tradition because we're saying we've always filtered spam, but it's valid to make that point here because people keep invoking horror stories about spam filters, saying they're either censorship or more subtly, they destroy block propagation speeds or centralized mining. And the point is pointing out that we've always done these things and that they are not the cause of some of those bad things, or those bad things have just never manifested at all, is appropriate. Nodes have always relayed what they want to relay and not relayed what they don't want to relay, and it's never harmed Bitcoin. So it's a very artificial concern, or a set of artificial concerns that was thrown at us, saying, you guys want to centralize mining, or you guys want to ruin block propagation, or you guys want to have bad fee estimation. Jimmy has made a few videos and he called these all fiat arguments. Fiat being a euphemism we use for just anything that's disingenuous or flawed or logically contradictory. So it's appropriate to point out that we've been filtering spam forever. You don't really want arbitrary data to be relayed around the network if you're running a node, unless you're specifically part of whatever scam coin it is that needs that arbitrary data. The two other things Luke said, I'll touch on quickly. There was the moral argument I really agree with here. A lot of people are very confused libertarians, and Adam actually opened with this in your conversation yesterday, saying Bitcoin is a libertarian, free market, all that stuff. First off, they never invoke the fact that I don't want to relay your stuff. And if you're a libertarian telling me I have to relay your stuff for the good of the overall network, you fail, because I'm not going to. And second off, some people are really upside down on the libertarian, ideology. When the minute you talk about right and wrong, they start talking about what's legal and illegal. And I'm saying I couldn't care less what's legal and illegal. And like Luke said, and I don't agree with Luke on everything here, but I definitely
hold on.
agree.
I gotta call a contradiction here. You clearly care about what's legal and illegal, because this entire video started off with illegal content might get into the chain, and now it makes it easier to get illicit content in the chain. So clearly that matters, right? You can't right now say it doesn't matter.
No, it does, but I'm saying even if it were not to, like Luke said, if the government's made just an exception that said, don't worry about Bitcoin nodes specifically, you can't have this content on your computer unless it's in the blockchain, then we'll turn a blind eye to it. It's still something that would disincentivize people to run nodes, just on the moral aspect alone. That's the point I'm making here. And I don't really focus on the legal aspect of it. I think pragmatically, it's a very important point. If you're in a situation where running a node is going to be, this is the worst kind of thing imaginable in some ways, because I used to say make Bitcoin illegal because it makes everyone run a node, because the only way you can interact with Bitcoin when you're suffering hostility from the state is without using a regulated, trusted third party. Like there'd be no more there's no Mt. Gox, no Coinbase, no third party custodians in a world where Bitcoin is being attacked directly like that. But the opposite, the one that really weakens Bitcoin is, sure, you can own Bitcoin, you can buy ETFs, all that stuff. You can trust a third party to hold your coins, but running a node is kind of weird. You need a license to do that, or there's a walled garden erected around it somehow. That's the scary,
right? But there isn't, right? So it's
that doesn't exist now, but you don't want to incentivize its creation.
Okay, so this brings me back to the CSAM and illicit content. Like no one was discussing it, right? Like I actually didn't. I'm not technical enough to tell you whether your statement of it's not really in historical blockchain or not. I'm not technical enough. I know there was some illicit content back in the early days, which was one of the reasons the 80 kilobyte op return filter was put in, but I don't know what form it was in. Maybe there was a picture already embedded or a link embedded. So I don't really. Okay, well, let me just finish real quick, right? So I know there was some illicit content there historically. I don't know in what form, but this whole narrative of, oh, the Bitcoin blockchain will now be used to store, CSAM images. That bus is being driven by you guys, right? So, like perhaps the entire Bitcoin libertarian community wouldn't be so scared of this if you guys weren't, with a megaphone screaming about it. What are your comments on that?
I'll let Luke jump in first.
I do want to point out, I think you just misspoke, but just in case, the limit on op return until recently was 80 bytes, not 80 kilobytes. Big difference there. But as far as historically goes, it has not been possible until Core v30 to store data larger than 83 bytes. There is no standard for that. There had been ways to bypass filters and abuse the system, but those are all abuses. They're not actual sanctioned data storage systems. So the Core 30 is going to be the first time that we have a sanctioned way to store data that can actually, like, the correct way to interpret this data is as data storage.
Yeah, so, and on top of that, the argument that we could just, I mean, this has been Adam's position a lot. Just shut up about it, guys. Nothing's going to happen, and you're making it more likely by talking about it. Basically, the Streisand effect, right?
I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point.
I think it's a trade-off. I'll acknowledge it's a trade-off. I acknowledge that talking about it makes it more likely, but I also think that people on the other side of this need to acknowledge the fact that Bitcoin is detested by some of the most powerful institutions in the world, and they probably thought of this already. And I didn't bring this argument up immediately. I tried to get people to read between the lines, and people weren't prepared to do that. Further, once I ripped the Band-Aid off and made the argument, people went and looked back at other blockchains and found out that BSV, which I'm taken by the poetry of the fact that Craig Wright could have taken a bullet for us and actually done us a favor for once, in the fact that when BSV, which is a clone of Bitcoin, did the exact same change from 80 bytes to 100 kilobyte op return, they got flooded with CSAM. And it caused a massive issue for their network, but they're centralized in the first place, so it doesn't take a lot for them to root around it. There's way more incentive to take Bitcoin out. And the fact that it happened on a chain that works the same way Bitcoin works for the most part, obviously there's a lot of changes in BSV, but the fact that that happened to me meant this is known. People are aware of doing this kind of stuff, and Bitcoin is far more important to protect than absolute garbage like BSV. So it's out there, it's known, the path is somewhat trodden, and talking about it preemptively is me trying to get it to stop. And people are saying it's me trying to manifest it. And it's the last thing I want to happen.
It's just adversarial linking. The bad actors already know these attacks. It's just adversarial linking at this point.
It is just, look, adversarial thinking.
Address problems without thinking about what they are.
Right. And I'll say the mentality among Core and their defenders has gone from adversarial thinking to stop talking about it and hopefully people just won't think about it, which is not serious. It's not remotely serious.
All right. So 2 questions to follow up on your comment. So your argument comes down to it's contiguous on op return versus something like inscriptions, which have to be with in 520 byte chunks or something like that.
The contiguous.
So that. All right, so that's question number 1. What difference does contiguousness make, like very practically speaking? And Mechanic, you challenged people before. Well, if you were going to get illegal material into the blockchain, then you would have to, like slipstream it tomorrow or something, and they're going to say no. What's the practical path, given, say, Core v30 is like 50% of the network or something like that. What's the practical path to getting CSAM in, and what are the incentives there in such that it has a practical shot of making it in rather than, the same sort of deterrents that are in the previous scenario, like miners saying, looking at it and saying, we're not going to put that in. Stuff like that. So, two questions. First, why does contiguousness matter? And two, what's the practical way? Because you claim that it was not practical to do it pre-Core v30, but now it's more practical or something like that. Something changed with Core v30 with the relay that it now makes CSAM material more likely to show up on chain.
Can I take the first one?
Sure.
Contiguousness basically does not matter. If Core v30 was simply standardizing the inscription vulnerability, making that a standard way to store data, it would be just as harmful. The only reason contiguousness ever came up was because there are automated systems on cloud hosting that will detect CSAM or malware in a contiguous form and immediately kill your server. That's the only reason that matters. That could be addressed by like teaching these detection systems that Bitcoin nodes are not actually malware or CSAM. The problem that's not the legal or moral problem. That's just a technical issue. The actual problem here with CSAM is the fact that this is a standard now for data storage. The correct way to interpret the blockchain is as CSAM. It's not a misinterpretation of the blockchain anymore. It's not transforming the blocks from one thing into the CSAM. It is actual CSAM on the chain because of the standard.
I haven't heard it put that way, and that's better than the response I would have given. So I'm going to adapt my perspective on that.
I think it's terrible calling it that, right? Because again, it's like you're gaslighting the whole situation in a very, topic that, this is like how this is basically what the government does, right? Do you want this wrapped in terrorism or do you want this wrapped in child porn? Either way, we're shutting this down, right? So this is how some people perceive like this kind of tactic, and probably why some of the pro core people have, kind of attacked you guys in the extreme way in the opposite direction, because this is how you're phrasing the whole debate instead of a technical way. I do want to technicals a little bit, but
I don't know what you're taking
this is
offense to,
gaslighting
because
in a
that was
bit,
all true.
especially when you give it you name it this way.
Well,
everything I said was true. I don't know what you're taking offense to.
yeah, I think the reason that, I'll address the general, that doesn't seem particularly relevant to what Luke said, but there certainly has been that pushback. The problem with that is sometimes there is a wolf, and just because people cry wolf when there isn't doesn't mean you roll your eyes at every single suggestion that there is, because wolves actually exist. And people that want to store malware or this kind of content that we're talking about have their dream come true with Bitcoin, because it's a naive file storing network where peers, you have hyper redundancy, tens of thousands of people independently storing your stuff. Uploading to it can be done anonymously, really cheaply. And I know multiple people that have been involved with law enforcement having to do forensics after networks of this stuff have been discovered. And they piggyback on top of school systems, hospital systems, where the IT department doesn't really know what they're doing. One day they discover a bunch of stuff, and it's the most horrific stuff you can imagine. But they can't use their own computers. They have to use someone else's, which is what the Bitcoin network is. It's someone else's hard drive, not yours. And they need the stuff to be readily available and served to them. And what would be really great is if the users couldn't delete it even if they wanted to, which is, we can talk about prune nodes and that kind of stuff, but ultimately not every node can be pruned, no matter how much you might want it to. So it's a gift. And frankly, the people I know that have been involved in having to work with the police on, forensics for this stuff have been like, I don't think core developers are aware that these kinds of people exist that are looking for a kind of network like Bitcoin to stop protecting itself from people that want to do that kind of stuff. So, yeah, terrorism and child porn, they're brought up to justify erosion of people's civil liberties. That is not what I'm doing here. I'm saying you are running a computer in your house, and it's your responsibility to not turn it into a generic file storage server. It's not an FTP server that you will let anonymous people dump 100 kilobyte files onto, because that's nuts. No one would do it regardless of legality. Regardless, I'm not a government entity trying to erode your civil liberties. I'm trying to tell you that your computer, it's up to you what you put on it. It's not appropriate for you to just say, hi, I have a file server in my house that anyone can upload files to using the Tor network, so they can be anonymous too. Have at it, guys. Have a great time. I'm supposed to be running a node in a monetary network, but I'm just happy with it being a file server. Like,
Well,
this is just,
all right.
this is
So
really,
before we
really
get,
reckless.
all right. So before we get to that, the follow-up question I have to Luke is, if it's not any different materially than, say, an inscription, right? Then why bring it up with this particular PR? Because this PR lets op return be large, but if it's materially not any different, whether it's contiguous or not, then shouldn't you be talking about the, like the many different things that ways in which it can get in there, and not particularly with respect to this op return change? Because I get
If
that it's also possible on the op return, but if they're essentially equivalent, like there's no real change because it's contiguous or not, then why speak about it now and not before? Because of like that would be the natural question for me.
the op return change is the first time and the only time so far that data storage has been made a standard beyond 83 bytes. The inscriptions as it stands are still an abuse stenographic way of hiding it in something that is not. It's meant to be script code. It's meant to validate a transaction. If the PR was to say, okay, this inscription envelope is now a recognized way to store data, then that PR would be just as problematic as the op return PR. The problem isn't how it's technically being done. The problem is that it is being done at all, that it is standardizing a way that is officially supported for data storage.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this argument. Like I said, me and Luke don't agree on everything, but this I find valid. Like, you can use a kitchen knife to stab someone, but kitchen knives are valid, and they're not for that. But if there's something specifically created for the purposes of harm and not self-defense or, cooking or whatever, then that thing is immoral, and you don't want to, like, Taproot was not created for inscriptions. It was created for a different purpose. And the fact that it gets used in a steganographic capacity, like Luke just highlighted, doesn't invalidate. It doesn't. You can backwards rationalize it and change documentation saying this was the point of Taproot if you want, but we see that for what it is. Whereas if we're making 100 kilobyte op return standard, we're just saying, yeah, this is for storing files. Like, you've made a feature, and it's wrong
Well,
to look
so
at it. Like,
help me
technically,
understand that like
don't
standardness
get
thing.
confused with what's technically a thing and what's symbolically just this is for this purpose and Taproot is for a different purpose. That it's labeled differently. It's a I don't know. I lack the the articulacy really here.
Well, so I think the argument that you're making is that this is sort of like sanctioned by core in some way by having this field be like up to 100,000 bytes, but that the inscription is not, because, as you said, it's steganographically hidden, right? So that's like a fancy word for you chop it into chunks and put it in there, that in a way that you have to like reassemble it somehow with specialized software or something like that. And I mean, to some degree, that has to happen with almost anything in Bitcoin, just because it's like the blockchain is just like a big blob of data. Um,
Right.
but
If you
like
take an inscription, if you
Mhm.
take an inscription and if you take the transaction, you decode it, what you end up with is a financial transaction that just has a very convoluted verification script. The correct
Okay.
way to interpret that is as a verification script. With
Mhm.
the changes Core has made with op return, the correct way to interpret it is a transaction that stores data.
Mhm.
Because of the way it is, the correct interpretation is what matters here.
Uh,
Because you can always interpret any data as any other data. You can take Satoshi's Genesis block and write a script that turns that into CSAM on your screen. There's a way to do that, I'm sure, just because of how technology works. But that doesn't mean the Genesis block is CSAM. The correct way to interpret the Genesis block is as the Genesis block. It's starting the network. It's not really actually trading coins, but that's another matter entirely.
Hey guys,
The correct way is not to interpret it as CSAM.
when was that op return limit put in? When was that 60? Is it 60 or 80? 60.
Well, it was
The-
40 in the beginning, and then it doubled to 80 at some point. I don't remember the exact
Okay,
date.
so even with the 40, right? So in the beginning, meaning, I mean, it wasn't there for the Genesis block. It probably wasn't there for the first transaction to Halfini. So it must have gotten put in maybe 6 months later, a year later, just a
No,
ballpark.
the op return code was always there. They actually had to fix it because there was a big bug with it. It let you
But
spend
the
from anything. But
standardization of
yeah,
40
yeah.
bytes was like 2012, 2013.
Okay,
Okay.
so the first time the spam filter got put in was around 2012.
Keep in mind, before up return at 40 bytes was a thing, it was just banned entirely. It was not allowed by the spam filters. The spam filters that Satoshi originally put in basically said nothing is allowed except for pay to pub key hash. It made what it was a whitelist based system that only allowed those known things.
So Bear Multisig wasn't on that list. I didn't realize that.
It may have been, I'm not sure,
Okay.
but Bear multisig in a raw form was never really used, so I'm not sure if it was or wasn't, or it was added later.
Mm.
So on this part, sorry guys, I'm gonna take over a little bit, and I wanna I wanna really dumb this down for myself and for some of the beginners that are watching. This is one of those podcasts where we want to target the advanced person and the beginner person. So in the before SegWit, we had our 1 megabyte block. I'm just gonna put that as 1M or 1 megabyte block. Okay. And in that 1 megabyte block, again, there's a bunch of Bitcoin transactions, and you have this op return limit of 80 bytes that prevents a single transaction from being too large. Hence, you can't really create a block that only has 10 or 20 transactions in it, right? So that's what it was pre-SegWit, right?
You could,
I
but
mean,
it would have to be
a miner
transferred.
would have to leave a lot of space empty.
No, you could like send a transaction to like 500 people all at once. The limit of 80 bytes was only for attaching data to the transaction.
Attaching data to the transaction,
You mean
sure.
a batch transaction, Luke?
The
No, but
batch
that's still,
transaction could be
to
very
me,
large, yes.
to me, a batch transaction is many, many, many transactions. Anyway,
It's
now
many outputs.
Many inputs, many
Right.
outputs, but yeah.
Well, it can be one input.
I'm really trying to keep it as simple as possible.
All right.
I'm really trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Sorry.
Now, so this is
Sorry, Tom, I get it now.
right? This is pre-SegWit. Now, post-SegWit, this is where things get interesting, right? Now, post-SegWit, the block is now up to 4 megabytes, but as far as a really base original transaction, it's still 1 megabyte, right? So if no one is using, and I'm going to say post SegWit, and I'm going to say post SegWit / Taproot, okay? Post SegWit / Taproot, right? Now you can have a 4 megabyte block, but if no one is using the SegWit Taproot code, nothing really changes. Agreed?
Sure.
Right? If everyone is still sending transactions, from addresses that start with 1 to addresses that end in that begin in 1, it's just like it was before, right?
Yes.
The only reservation I would have is that the 4 megabyte is hypothetical. It's even if everyone uses SegWit or Taproot, it does not approach 4 megabytes.
Right, I know.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
we're not. I don't want to go into the little tiny like semantic details, right? Again, it's only explained to the average person. So, but because of the SegWit and Taproot change, and this is that whole continuity thing, right? So now spammers like the Udis of the world and the Mike and Spaces and the Ordinals people and all the crazy people, right? They're still using, their current, like before version 30, they're limited to 80 to 80 bytes of data stuffed into a Bitcoin transaction that's in this zone, right? But now I want to kind of expand it, right? So this has a total of 4 megabytes, right? But it's kind of like this. I'm going to say these three together is an additional, I'm going to merge these cells, and this has an additional 3 megabytes in it, and I want to center it because I am, anyway. So it's kind of like this, right? So now they're still limited by this 80 byte rule to stuff things in here. But what we learned after SegWit and Taproot, that all these spammers have now shown up on Bitcoin, and they are abusing this SegWit and Taproot ability to stuff a bunch of crap into the witness data, which is blowing up the UTXOs and the unspent transactions, and it's actually making things very, very annoying. But the total size of the block has not changed, right? The total size of the block is still 1 megabyte, but you can now stuff an additional 3 megabytes into or close to it, into the witness data, right? From a layman's perspective,
Witness data is part of the block.
I know it's part of the block, right? But again, but the Taproot and SegWit allows the ability to stuff a bunch of stuff into something. But so this is in a layman's terms, the consensus is still 1 megabyte, but the way you can make transactions is you can stuff more, up to 3 additional megabytes in through like the witness data and all the other things. So at the moment, this is, again, I'm trying to fully understand what Bitcoin Core did, and then we can debate whether they're doing it maliciously or they're doing it, not maliciously. That's the debatable part. Right? I'm trying to understand the technological side of it as simple as possible. So this is where they want to remove the 80 byte limit. So this had 80 byte limit. This part, no 80 byte limit. No 80 byte limit. No 80 byte limit at all. Let me put an arrow right here to
it didn't allow any. Would it be a 0 byte limit in comparison?
I'm sorry, what?
It would be 0 byte limit because it didn't allow any data storage.
What didn't allow any data storage?
SegWit and Taproot.
SegWit and Taproot didn't allow any data storage where? In this part or in this part?
In the 3 megabytes on your thing.
In a 3 megabyte. Okay, but that was the compromise, right? Again, we can get a time machine and we can go and we can explain to everyone, maybe making the blocks bigger as a compromise to the big blockers as part of the soft fork of SegWit, which you helped put together, by the way, Luke, which sounded awesome at the time. In hindsight, maybe this was a bad idea, right? And I think this is why you wanted to lower the block size to 250 to 250 instead of 1 meg, right? 250,000 kilobytes.
I usually say 300, but sure.
Okay. Anyway, okay. So here's where we stand. So Core has now eliminated this limit. Now, there's one more thing I want to add before I go on with my Excel spreadsheet. I'm actually going to make this bigger. Before I go on with this Excel version, I want to pull up the Bitcoin. Let's assume this is accurate and everyone is running an honest node, right? So we have, there are other nodes that people can run. I mean, Bitcoin Core is 80%. The majority of it is not version 30. I think the majority of it is still older versions. Obviously, you guys are on the NOT side because you designed NOTs. But there are other nodes already that exist on the network that don't have an op return limit, right? So if I go to, let's say, this diagram from one of the articles that I read, something like this. Let me get this diagram. Nope, not that one. This one, right? So right now, so prior to version 30, it kind of looked like this, right? Everything in, imagine these gray nodes is like a million of them and only 2 of these red ones. And the red ones have no limit on op return whatsoever. So technically, if I go back to this diagram and there is 0.1%, I mean, I'm just picking on Bitcoin Classic. I know that's the freaking shitcoin stuff. But this node could theoretically allow no limit on op return. So you can create a Bitcoin transaction with 100, with 1 megabyte of data, and a miner can always pick it up and process it even a year ago and 2 years ago. Am I wrong in that understanding?
1 or 2 nodes, even if they've got malicious miner to back them up, that doesn't establish a standard.
Oh, I agree. Oh, I come sure. I 100% agree. It's not a standard, but a miner on the network for the last, ever since, well, forever technically, could have processed one of these transactions with an op return that's maxing out the 1 megabyte of data. And here's the thing, right? So the op return data limit, or no limit at all, right? No data limit on op return means the limit is 1 megabyte. So if someone today with Taproot in existence created a Bitcoin transaction and maxed out, because there is no op return limit, maxed it out to 1 megabyte, this does not apply. This won't apply. There will be no SegWit, no witness data at all. It would all be stuffed in here, just like it could have been stuffed in here pre-SegWit, and this could have been done on a node, and a miner could have picked it up at any point in history. Am I wrong in that understanding, or is that correct?
You're wrong in thinking that's relevant.
Okay, so okay, so you don't think it's relevant? No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just trying to understand how the system works, right? So I'm sorry, right? So that could have been done. Now, building onto this, right? With the new no 80 byte limit, people can't do it. They technically could have done it. It wasn't the standard. So now the Bitcoin Core is making it, I guess they're kind of making it the standard, but in my view, there are 2 technical-ish reasons why they might be doing it, and I would love for you guys to tell me that they're terrible views. One of them is, the continuity of data. Okay, this is the other part that you mentioned. So to stuff data in here, you can't just stuff one single picture that takes up 3 megabytes. It gets somehow broken up into pieces. And right here, because you're limited to 80 bytes per transaction, you can't really stuff a 1 megabyte image in. But because of the no limit, now they couldn't stuff an entire image in here. They were just using this in a terrible way to make Bitcoin inefficient. Now there is an ability to stuff a 1 megabyte image into what was an original on-chain transaction. Is that understanding correct? Kind of. Everyone is in silence. Sort
I'll
of.
be honest. I'll be honest. I zoned out. Did anyone else? Sorry, Tom.
So Toad, there's a you could break it up. It's not really like the thing is you're making it sound like there's 3 extra megabytes of data that you can put in a SegWit transaction. That's not how it works. The witness field just has a discount of 1/4. So if you stuff everything in a block into the witness field, then it would be at max 4 megabytes. So, but most transactions aren't
it would be
like that.
I'm sorry, it would be at max what? I didn't hear that.
4 megabytes. 4 megabytes.
Sure. Okay, but again,
Yeah.
now we're talking semantics, right? I'm just trying to understand why. Again, I'm trying to break down why what they're doing is so bad. Because from their point of view, from what I've been reading and what I've been researching, their view is, first of all, miners could have always done this. At least the big miners could have. Now, one thing you said earlier, guys, is that miners would, if someone wanted to do one of these, and again, there is an image for it as well. Let's say there isn't a single node on the network that wants to put more than 80 bytes worth of data into the op return. Someone can still make this transaction, create an API directly to the miner, and the miner can still process it, right? No node needs to actually relay it to the miner. Someone can directly pay a miner and get it done. Now, your answer to this was, well, a miner would look into this transaction, they will see the illicit content, and they wouldn't process it. But why can't a miner look at the transaction now and choose not to process it? What's the difference?
Yeah, so this is a question that I asked Mechanic earlier, is what's the practical path in which CSAM material gets into the chain? Like, if you said it's not possible pre-Core v30, or it wasn't happening Core v30, what's the path post v30? Because I think you went on a diatribe about like file storage and FTP servers, but you have to have a way to upload to the FTP server, right? Like, so what's the method, and how, like, what's the incentive for each player that's different than pre v30?
Right. It wasn't, sorry, Jimmy. It wasn't happening, but it was possible, right? Like no one debated me on the fact that it wasn't possible.
It was definitely possible. Yeah.
Core 30 has essentially, aside from the standardization matter, Core 30 has also removed the additional steps needed to put this kind of spam in the blocks. So if you do nothing, if you don't modify Core v30, it will put 100 kilobytes of data in your blocks, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, but how would it get in? Mechanic earlier said that it wasn't getting in because miners are looking at it and then saying we're not going to process this.
Well, that's true.
What's the change?
The change is that it starts being ubiquitously relayed around the network, and then instead of having one giant regulated US entity with well-established terms and conditions, you just have anyone able to mine it, whether it gets in the chain regardless of whether they're paying attention. And even if it doesn't, great, now it just sits in everyone's mempool until they finally evict it, which is hardly any better. Like, the problem is that this
Core 30 does not allow miners to pre-approve or review these things.
Yeah, we don't want to entrench that. I've been saying this, Confucius say that if you make mempool retarded, you invite content moderation by miners. That is inevitably going to happen. And this is everything I'm arguing about here is pretty much backed up by precedent, and it's not a theoretical point, it's real, which is why I bring up the BSV thing. I'm trying not to go on another diatribe, but the point is, Mara did OFAC compliance. They started only mining a subset of financial activity, and we went crazy at them. Now they have arbitrary file storage with Slipstream, And they do content moderation for that, and no one cares because everyone intuitively knows Bitcoin is not immutable, fungible file storage. It isn't. We know that you have to treat all UTXOs as equal, but no one expects you to treat files as equal. That's just not how people work.
All right. So, well, right. But okay. So the practical way it gets in, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that 100 kilobyte CSAM material gets flung around the Bitcoin network, and some miner not paying attention, not filtering or anything, just sort of includes it in a block, despite the legal and liability that might be. The person that creates it also creates it just because they can, even though obviously they have to pay fees to somebody, so there's an input that can be traced back to them if they're not careful. So like it seems to me like what you're saying is that it's going to get in like inevitably, but there seem to be just as many sort of roadblocks in a peer-to-peer network. Like if you're a miner and you're on the peer-to-peer network and not one of the centralized mining entities or whatever, you're motivated to not mine that stuff for the same reason that the big miners are. No,
But
like it
but
just
core
seems
does
like
not allow you to. Core does not allow you as a miner to say you're not mining these transactions.
right. But I mean, you can do stuff like set data carrier size to 80 or something like that, right? Like there's you don't have to mine these things if you don't want to, and especially if you're sort of on the peer-to-peer network and you're mining, you're probably not going to want spam. I guess there could be miners on the peer-to-peer network that are sort of driven by the same sort of homo economicus view of miners that a lot of core devs have. Like I'm struggling to understand how it gets in, because to me all of the same sort of restrictions that you described for pre V30 are still kind of there, right? If you're a miner
No, they're
and
not. That's the point.
well,
Like
The core V30 has removed those restrictions.
you have a P2P network relaying it. You didn't before.
Mm.
All you had was Libra relay nodes, and you had, a couple of people that changed data carrier size manually against their own interest, and one pool soliciting it. That's not the same as post-core V30.
But you're saying against their own interests. That's an opinion, right? Like they because their interests don't have to be CSAM content, right? Their interest might be some kind of a legitimate use for the Bitcoin blockchain. Again, at the moment I don't know what that legitimate use is, but clearly there are a few companies. I've already forgot the name of one of them that people are saying influences Bitcoin Core in order to put this in because they have some kind of a project, and some people think it is spammy on the Bitcoin blockchain, and they're saying, no, this is a real use case, and we need a bigger op return ability. And Bitcoin Core just said, you know what? Maybe we don't even need an op return limit at all, and we're going to get back into a few more reasons as to why they've said that.
But I mean, I'm still like, are you saying that the decentralized miners are not going to filter, that they're just going to run stock V30 with the 100K default, and whatever happens, even if they might be legally liable, they're not going to be more careful? Like I'm trying to understand how it gets in.
The big threat is that core V30 makes it a standard. And so if any miner, no matter how small, puts it in a block, it is now a standard way to store data, and it's in the blockchain as data storage.
Right, but the whoever mines it has to take on that risk, right? Like, because it doesn't matter if you're big or small, you still have risk.
It's not a risk for the miner any more than it is for every other full node.
I mean, but Mechanic was saying earlier, the reason why Mara wasn't mining CSAM was because of the legal liability. So does the miner have liability or not?
There is a risk. It's the same as for every other node, though. And maybe Mara will not turn this core 30 thing on. Maybe they'll explicitly turn it off. but it only takes one as long as it's a standard.
Yeah,
No,
and also
I'm-
that's that. No, but Jimmy, that is the crux of it. I've tried to get an answer to this question, and I get stonewalled. Mara solicits content externally to the P2P network with Slipstream. It's a private API where you can submit it. They submit all that stuff. They subject all the stuff submitted that way to content moderation. Are they going to subject the stuff they receive through the vanilla P2P network to the same content moderation? That question has not been answered, and it tells you the difference. Because, like, if I'm a big miner and I have shareholders, I'm a publicly traded entity in the US, and I'm specifically soliciting people to submit files for me to upload to the blockchain, obviously my legal department says you can't just upload anything. You can't upload copywritten content. You can't upload pornography. You can't upload, malware. And obviously everyone expects them to do that, and they do. But as the Bitcoin network, we expect miners to put everything that they receive via their node running normally on the network in the chain. And if they don't, we call it censorship. That's what mempool space does. That's what we freaked out about with OFAC compliance. We have two standards at once because we have two different uses. We have the financial use case and we have the data storage use case. We treat these things as different in our head, and we haven't reconciled the philosophical difference between the two. So I'm saying, what are you going to do as a miner when files are just unapologetic file storage containing the stuff that isn't allowed in any other system? What are you going to do? What as a miner, what do you do in that situation? Because you don't have the same
you're
kind of
suggesting that
responsibility.
it's very different when you get slipstreamed a transaction versus when it comes in through the peer-to-peer network. But we saw with Libre Relay, it came through the peer-to-peer network, and they still mined it. And
But that's not the
presumably they were
peer-to-peer
still.
network. Preferential peering is not the peer-to-peer network. That's Peter Todd being an asshole, attacking the network by trying to cut through it, cut holes in it, and try and encumber nodes with data they don't want because they're refusing to relay it themselves. So it masks itself in this whole
so
freedom
are you saying
flowery
that?
I wouldn't
language.
say that. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
Would you
Well,
say
I
that that's a
would.
third category then? Slipstream, peer-to-peer network, Libre Relay? Because, like,
I
from a
would say
legal
Libre Relay
perspective, it
is
seems very
direct,
similar
just
to the
like
peer-to-peer
Slipstream.
network.
What's that, Luke?
I would say I would say Libre Relay is essentially the same as Slipstream.
Yeah, it's just people helping Slipstream out by giving them the facade of a genuine permissionless P2P network.
I'm asking you, does Mara see it that way? Because I see it as, okay, Slipstream is very specific, right? Like they solicit it, it's their own API. Libre Relay is like a node that they're connecting to on the peer-to-peer network, and they get it. Like for them, legally speaking, is that any different? Because like they seem to have taken a lot of Libre Relay transactions and put it into the blockchain. So like you're making this distinction between Slipstream and Mara and the peer-to-peer network, and saying that, okay, well, they're going to reject anything from the Slipstream because they're more legally liable, but from peer-to-peer they're not going to be legally liable, so they'll
No,
allow
I
all
haven't made
sorts
that
of stuff.
statement. I'm saying that remains an unanswered question. I don't know what they're going to do, and I haven't asserted that. I've asked it, and I can't get an answer. In my opinion, we yell at them when they discriminate from stuff they receive from the vanilla P2P network, and we don't care when they discriminate about stuff they receive via Slipstream. I'm just saying that's the reality of how we react as a community. And I'm saying, is that going to persist?
Yeah, I'm still not figuring out a way in which this material gets in, because you're saying, well, they might do it, and then you're going on about, well, then it's going to be all sorts of file storage, but who's actually going to mine this CSEM material? Right? I mean, like that to me is I'm still not seeing a path.
I kind of understand. I understand what he's saying. Let me just I just want to, again, for our more beginner viewers, the slipstream is like this API picture where not a single node on the network wants to propagate this transaction with more than 80 bytes of op return, and then someone just phones into the miner saying, hey, I have this transaction. I'm going to pay you $1,000 if you mine it and you stick it in. And even if that transaction, takes up like, I don't know, 1% of the entire mempool, it could be advantageous for the miner to do it. And the big miners are the ones that these people reach out to because no one is going to ask you with your bid axe at home to mine this transaction, right? So because it's a miner that's going to find the block relatively quickly. And Mechanic is on the opposite end of the whole situation. Well, when there's only 2 nodes on the network or like a small percentage of the network, when there's only 10% of the network that doesn't want op returns of more than 80 bytes, and all the nodes on the network are kind of allowing any amount, there's no op return limit, then Mara or any big miner, they're not going to have the compliance department to check every single transaction that's happening on a network. They're just going to mine them all because the network is accepting them.
Correct.
The network kind of approved the transaction for the miner itself, even if that transaction has some, very illicit content, which again, no one was really talking about until you guys started driving the bus on how scary this is, because we don't know how scary this actually is. We
Well,
just
Look, I agree with that. I appreciate you clarifying that. Again, I'm not really litigating the Streisand effect thing. This is going to happen whether we brought it up as an attack or not. But what your overall point there and summary is correct. Mara can afford to do content moderation, and they can afford to do what they need to maintain safe harbor provisions and say, okay, someone emailed us a thing via our API that we didn't upload. It was revolting. Here's the guy's IP address. We didn't upload it into the chain, obviously. Here's the laptop or whatever they've got to do. A guy with 50 petahash that does find a block every couple of months isn't going to be able to do that kind of content analysis or give themselves the necessary legal immunity. So this is a very centralizing thing. If you're trying to look, if the P2P network just relays transactions, no matter how controversial they are, we will take the heat of that. Satoshi was scared by it and said, WikiLeaks has kicked the hornet's nest. It would have been nice to get this attention in any other capacity. Then we had Silk Road, but I will defend controversial transactions. It's not that hard to defend. But if you're going to start relaying arbitrary files around, it doesn't take long before people go, all right, I'm going to put stuff in here that's going to create problems for Bitcoiners because it's basically indefensible. Then all you're doing is begging the centralized mining cartel to be the adults in the room and say, all right, don't worry, we're Foundry, we're Antpool, we're Mara, and like the 6 other mining companies there are basically on the planet. Deal with it for us. They be the adults in the room. They start subjecting everything to content moderation, and they don't fill the chain up with nonsense because they're not incentivized to do it. They barely make any money, even if they turn a blind eye to it, because they make so much from subsidy still. So there's just no way you don't end up with centralized mining as a result of that. If someone breaks ranks and decides they want to earn, a couple of $100 extra, including some op return that makes life very difficult for people that want to store the blockchain on their computer at home.
I mean, again, the part that's like that I'm struggling to understand is how is this different than the current situation? Because you could do the same thing on inscriptions, right? Like it's like there's all of this what you said about like people slinging around transactions that have arbitrary data, and then we already have that in inscriptions, and they're getting mined.
But they're
Like
not
it's
standard as data storage.
right. So
Again.
I'm not sure how much that changes the actual behavior of the users, though. Like that's or the people that are
all right, but look,
embedding
start at the other end of it.
Why do you say encryptions aren't standard? I mean, like anyone that's running, the Taproot, it can use encryptions, right? So that is standard now. Like
No,
that.
it's
I mean,
not
we don't
standard.
see it as spam and shit coining, but technically it's the standard.
No, it isn't.
Jimmy?
There is no standard that says this is how you store data on Bitcoin.
I get Luke's
Except for-
point that the op return field is specifically designated and has been historically for data that's like kind of metadata around the transaction or arbitrary data really related to the transaction. But like the risks that you guys are talking about with CSAM and all this arbitrary data and stuff, it's already possible
Right.
and it's already being done. And I'm
It's just
struggling
being
to
done.
understand why it's different now that you have this other field. Maybe it's more sanctioned or something like that.
Right.
But
It's being done in here. It's just not being done in here, right? So all that Bitcoin Core did is, and this is one of the tweets that I was sent to look at, and I completely misunderstood it. It's like this is a terrible analogy, right? They're kind of like, okay, so we kind of have all this garbage, it's also going way too fast. This is their garbage can example, right? Like right now, there is a bunch of let me go back to this. There is a bunch of
no one
garbage.
says op return. No one is making the argument that op returns aren't slightly better than fake pub keys. Like we know the silver lining with op returns, and like it's better if there's a garbage can and they put their trash in there than throw it on the ground. Like
Right.
I
So
understand
what
that,
they're
but it's
right. What they're trying to do is they're trying to look, if you're gonna have trash, maybe it's better to have the trash in the in the main original part of the Bitcoin transaction versus having the trash in like the SegWit witness area that makes other shit less efficient.
well,
yeah.
it's not the SegWit witness area. It's more about the pub keys, the UTXO stuff.
Pub keys, sure. UTXOs, pub keys, right.
Well, those arguments cancel each other out rather elegantly. The first is we don't want them using fake pub keys, so we'll give them op return so that they use that instead. But no one's going to use op return because it's generally cheaper once you get above like 200 bytes for them to witness stuff instead.
Yeah.
So
Right,
we want this
now
because
you-
it's
but-
better
but
if they
now-
use it, but they're not going to use it because it's cheaper to use something else. Like no one that's
So if
into
they're-
Bitcoin.
yeah, so mechanics. So if they're not going to use it, now you're arguing against yourself. They're not going to use it.
No, I'm saying
why are
they.
you guys the biggest
they're
drivers
not-
of the bus against it?
That's not what I said,
But
Tone.
they're
I'm
not
saying
going
their
to use
argument
it.
is
That is correct.
simultaneously. All right, go ahead, Luke.
They are not going to use op returns over 200 bytes or so. They will just go to back to the inscriptions for that. But because op returns have standardized data storage, we are now inviting this stuff in any form onto the network. VCs will invest in these scam startups that are going to bloat our network more with more inscriptions than if we were hostile to it.
But the miners don't have to mine that transaction, right?
No, they don't. But I don't want to rely.
If they
I
run
want
core,
to be
they
able
do have
to
to.
look. Miners need to be. It's a pretty uncomfortable territory to go into if miners start only mining a subset of transactions. Historically, when they've done that, we've been very upset with them. And
But isn't that what the limits are? Like you're forcing the miners to mine a subset of transactions, right?
no, we're trying to not even relay them in the first place. Like this is all kind of uncharted territory, but basically the precedent that makes Bitcoin look uncensorable, even though it's totally censorable by two companies at the moment, and let's just pretend that's not true for a minute. You want to relay everything financial unless it's something that's malicious to the network. So if it's spamming dust outputs or obvious examples like that, nodes don't relay that stuff. Then whatever it is that's getting happily relayed around the network, you want miners to include all of it, starting at the top down from what fees they pay, with a bunch of exceptions. But if they start picking from a subset based on some government list, like the OFAC blacklist or something, then we go nuts at them and say, you're censoring Bitcoin. No one says this is great because another miner that's more economically rational will include those OFAC blacklisted transactions. No one said that when Mara did the OFAC compliance. They just went nuts and their stock price fell and they stopped doing it. So
Right.
that to me is like that's a happy equilibrium. It's not particularly robust, but that's how Bitcoin has operated up until this point. If we want to start relaying masses of stuff and saying, don't worry, the miners just won't include it in the chain if it's really bad, that's not a good look, because that backslides into doing the same thing with controversial financial activity. This is how you end up with censorship. If we're relaying by standard practice, by Core's default policy, stuff that miners would never include in the chain because they're not stupid, then whatever technology it is they use to discern based on the content of the files, not the format, because the spam filters just filter based on format. That's not controversial. they're starting to filter not based on format, but based on the content of the files. They do some deeper introspection and say, what is this op return? Sure, it's a 100 kilobyte op return, but what does it actually contain? Oh, it's an MP4. Let's play it on this sanitized, isolated environment we've created. Okay, we can't include that in the chain. Whatever that system is, that whole the infrastructure that gets built around looking at what content really is, obviously that gets used to target financial activity that is unpopular, that for some reason the state doesn't like.
All right, I'm gonna comment on this real quick. So, also, I forgot to add another definition. When you guys were talking about like Libre
Relay.
Relay, this is like, imagine it as like another. I'm gonna dumb this down. Imagine it as another type of node that does propagate these no op return limit transactions that the miners could pick up, and this had existed prior to this big controversy. Is my layman understanding correct?
It existed like originally for full RBF and stuff like that, but
Sure.
yeah, Peter modified it specifically for the op return stuff and,
Right. So
and
that's
subset
the,
stuff and stuff like that.
so that's the system that has existed, that had always allowed miners to mine these transactions. But yes, I agree with Mechanic.
No.
It wasn't the standard.
No, Libre Relay did not allow these transactions previously. It was known as Satoshi RBF, and it only was on full RBF for a long time. It did not expand any limits.
But now it does.
So it changed over time is the point, Tone. It didn't start with this complete, like, let's just...
Sure, no, it didn't start, but it has been this way for, pre-version 30 at some point.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and Peter Todd, I think, made that change maybe, I don't know, February, March, something like that.
And it was probably to prove a point that, Bitcoin's not going to die if there are transactions that have op returns of greater than 80. But Mechanic, going back to what you said, right? Miners, they're not going to all of a sudden start playing these MP4 videos to check, because they don't have time for that. So doesn't that make sense that if a miner is running into an unreasonably large transaction with a massive op return in its data, it's to the miner's advantage to just say, you know what, I don't want to mine that one. I don't have time to check what the hell is in this transaction. It is too big. I don't want to take a risk. I'm not mining that. Okay.
Yeah.
So a miner can make that decision without checking what that data is. It'll just be up to the miner. And especially with your mining pool, a user can decide. They have their own filter on what they mine and they don't, right? So again, I'm trying to figure out where the fire is on this.
The fire is just the fact that it will probably end up getting mined at some point, because in theory, mining is decentralized, and how, there's $1,000 on the table to include this transaction.
But that's the current pre-V30 situation as well.
No, it's not, because they're going to have to modify stuff to not accidentally mine it post Core 30. If they just run Core 30, they will just mine it. It's a default now.
Well, I mean, but he's saying you could do it in an inscription or whatever. Like it's, but I don't see it as materially different, because there's a standard field now, like that's larger. Like you were saying, whether CSAM is in the inscription or in the op return, as far as morally, legally, whether it's contiguous or not, it's really same liability. Like
look, I understand that, but there are always going to be nitpicks along the way where something is technically not that different to something that existed prior. And I'm saying this is materially different, and you're saying it isn't. And here's the point. I know that if you start at an absurd endpoint, like it's not even let's say Bitcoin isn't even a monetary network. It's literally just file storage. It's all runs on Tor. It's all permissionless. You have to store everything forever, otherwise it doesn't work. Something absurd like that. I know that network's dead, because no one fundamentally has the incentive to store other people's files for free, especially if those files get heat and a target painted on their back, like the same way that Tor exit nodes get, right? If you run a Tor exit node, the FBI is kicking down your door in like 50% of scenarios, right? No one wants that kind of drama. I know that Bitcoin isn't going to be that with a robust, thriving, relatively doxed enthusiastic P2P network. I know that doesn't work. And I know that getting there from being a pure monetary network with all these spam filters and standardness policies that kept it monetary, I know that getting there requires multiple steps. The problem is every single one of those steps, people say, technically, we're not that different from the step before. And I'm like, true. So you had something that wasn't quite 100 kilobytes of contiguous data. It was all broken up due to the, a misuse of Taproot, which wasn't intended for that. That's, just the tip, right? It starts slowly and gets worse over time. And at some point, you end up with a dead network for the reasons I said, because no one's incentivized to just run free cloud storage for other people, no matter how much they might use it for the monetary purpose. Eventually,
I get that you're making sort of like a slippery slope argument. You go from one thing to a little bit worse and a little bit worse.
Yeah.
And perhaps your argument is that we have to take a stand somewhere, and this is as good as any, or something like that. I can respect that argument. It just it feels like it's like kind of an arbitrary point to take a stand, if that makes sense, and it doesn't feel like it's a huge materially different situation. It's just that you do have to take a stand, and I think both of you guys were very much against like once the inscriptions came. I know Luke put in a PR for let's put the SegWit size back to SegWit field size to 3600 again for Taproot, so stuff like that.
Yeah,
which,
so
yeah.
It may appear
You
arbitrary.
keep saying it's not materially different, but it's not. It is materially different. It's one thing to have an abuse, it's another thing to have a standard.
I agree.
Like I said earlier, you can write a program that takes the Genesis block and displays CSAM based on the Genesis block. But that doesn't mean the Genesis block is CSAM.
I agree.
It's
And
the
I also think
standardization of data storage that makes it so the correct interpretation of the blockchain is the image.
I agree. And I'll further make the point that even I agree with Luke, but even if what Luke was saying was true and it was as Jimmy portrays it, that it's just an arbitrary point where we decided that's enough. 21% of the network demonstrably decided suddenly that it was enough. But when inscription started and we had a problem with it, 1% of the network was running knots. So clearly most people didn't agree that that crossed a line. Whereas op return seems to have crossed a line for people to run a non-standard client to finally ditch core and say, I've had enough of this. And if this is a problem, and you're saying that if you agree with me, Jimmy, that the end game is dead, but that you would pick a different arbitrary point that was further down the road, I'm saying logically you would have to, or pragmatically at least, you would have to say, all right, this is the Schelling point. Enough people are not okay with the slow mission creep into arbitrary file storage, shitcoin storage, all that stuff. Enough people have decided this is not good enough. Like you've got Vitalik saying, oh, they censored me, so I had to build Ethereum somewhere else. Now you've got Vitalik saying, great, I really approve of what the core developers are doing. They're completely right. The fact that you have all these signs come together means that you have basically a community that says, this is becoming a problem. We have to do something about it. So arguments to the effect of, it's not bad enough yet. I'm like, the next war that comes in the creep to arbitrary data, it will be too late. This is the point to stand up against it.
Jimmy, last thought, then I want to move on to the transition that Mechanic just brought up.
Well, so I want to challenge this idea that the people that are running knots is because they're standing on this particular this is their stand against spam or something like that. I mean, it very much could be, but at least for me, the reason I'm running knots on one of my nodes is because I found the op return PR to not pass the smell test. And I think that's a legitimate reason why a lot of people are running knots, and not necessarily because, hey, the scope creep of spam is getting out of hand and I'm putting my foot down here. I mean, to a large degree, I'm not even sure a lot of the people can articulate specifically why they're running knots. It's just, for me, at least, it's because the op return PR didn't pass the smell test. I like the 1 to 21% that you cite. Definitely true. That has happened, but the reason why, I'm not necessarily sure that it's because of what you said.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to prove. You have a migration away from like it could be for unrelated reasons. I agree, but I don't know. Politics is messy, and let's be honest, this is a political battle. It's not a particularly technical battle, and that is what it is. People are running stuff. They make decisions. I see people on the not side make bad arguments all the time, and I try and call it out when I can. But I see plenty of people making bad arguments on the core side too. So I don't know what.
I got three topics left. Two of them were
All right.
just mentioned. I think the order of them is going to be backwards than I wanted. But so I have this graph up. I'm going to go back to what Mechanic said. Then Jimmy, I do want to talk about doesn't pass the smell test. And then the third topic is what is Ocean Mining Pool doing about this going forward? So that would be the third topic. So on this topic, as Mechanic stated, Knots was like, well, I remember doing presentations, and I did a presentation on Bitcoin's decentralization, and I had this graph, and Knots was like 1%, which was still the second biggest, but at 1%. It is currently at around 20% of the network. People are running Knots. Now, out of this 30% of Bitcoin Core, the majority are not even running v30, I don't believe. I mean, we can check the stats. That doesn't matter, right?
But
Not much,
30
yeah.
is like 500 nodes or something. It's not a very large number right now.
It's not a large number, but again, it took forever for people to run SegWit as well, right? So a lot of people are just lazy to update. And
Right.
and you're right, a lot of people are going to just update by default because core is what they've always ran. But what does it mean to run knots, right? Because I'm going to go back to this graph here, and let's say this becomes the situation. Let's say knots grows in popularity, and obviously core v eventually people will upgrade their nodes to v30, and we have one of these systems. Or let's say the red nodes are the knots nodes, and the majority of the people do not want Bitcoin transactions with more than 80 bytes of op return. But there is enough nodes out there, even a minority, even 5% of all the nodes being version 30, all of these transactions will still go through. If I send, or if I send a Bitcoin payment to you, Mechanic, and that payment, and just for the shits and giggles, I embed a picture in that transaction, not an illicit one, just a picture of me barbecuing, and that picture is greater than 80 bytes of data, you are running a knots node. It's not going to take long for that transaction to end up in your Bitcoin wallet. It is still going to go through. So at the end of the day, people that are running knots nodes, at the moment, how are they different than people sticking Ukrainian flags in their Twitter profile? They're not actually stopping these transactions from going through.
Because if I don't stick a Ukrainian flag in my profile, it materially makes life harder for Ukrainians. That's the assumption. It's not an empty virtue signal. It's literally, I don't need to help spammers get their stuff in the chain. And core is removing my ability to differentiate between financial activity and file storage. I have no incentive, guys, to be relaying someone. It's just too long, didn't read, not relaying your spam. That's all there is to it. If it ends up in the chain, it ends up in the chain, but I don't have to assist in that process. That's not a virtue signal. That's literally bad things happen, but I don't want to participate in facilitating them. That's all.
That's
But
with regard to
happen,
spam.
right? There's an assumption of bad things potentially happening in theory.
But why do I have to help? Why should I relay spam? I never have.
My mic working?
Luke, sorry, I interrupted Luke. Go
ahead. That what Mechanic says is perfectly correct about spam. But when it comes to CSAM, I want to point out that one, having the majority of the network running nuts is a very clear indicator to courts, prosecutors, whoever, the public in general, that the network has rejected Core 30's change to standardized data storage. So the change that Core 30 is trying to deploy now to make a standard use case for data storage has been rejected by whatever percent of the majority of nodes on the network. And so there's at least an argument there if you get dragged to court over this, that you've rejected this standard. Most of the Bitcoin network has rejected the standard. So there is that. Obviously, you don't want to get dragged to court at all. And that is a risk if a significant minority do run this Core 30 and miners run Core 30 and actually end up mining this stuff. So that is still a problem in that regard, which is why you've seen, or at least I've seen, like a lot of people calling for a soft fork lately. Some people calling for a hard fork, not realizing there's no reason you'd ever hard fork for that. But
yeah, it might make sense.
I'm not going to say that is not still a problem, and that may be something the network should consider doing.
Right. Well, that was going to be my final topic on with the ocean mining pool. But I will, again, I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate. I hope you guys aren't pissed at me, but I'm just being a tough journalist at this point. But yes, I agree with you that currently approximately 20% of the network are rejecting core version 30 by running NOTs nodes. Now, I know some people are skeptical on the number because you can always spin these nodes. One person can be running thousands of nodes, but let's assume the number is accurate, 20%. You don't feel like one of the reasons why it's this high at 20% is because the whole thing has been gaslighted under going back to CSAM and child pornography stuff. And if it wasn't gaslighted under that,
no, not at all, because it was about
maybe it wouldn't be 20%. Maybe it would only be 5%.
All the gaslighting has been the core advocates. All the gaslighting has been core advocates. The CSAM issue is a real issue.
Look, man, if and when this thing happens, Peter Todd and Adam Back have already said it's basically my fault for bringing it up. They've personally laid the blame at my feet in invoking the Streisand effect. It's not a thing I wanted to discuss. Everyone is calling me a Fed over it. And NOT's adoption was about 19% before we raised it. If anything, bringing that up made everyone go, these guys are Feds, I don't like it, and stopped, and adoption pretty much stopped around that point. We've leveled off at around 22%, according to BitNodes. So again, it's just like Greg Maxwell constantly saying this is all ocean marketing. This does absolutely nothing for us as people. The actual incentive, if people are looking for a smoking gun about why I'm doing this, is because I have my life savings in Bitcoin, and this puts it in a precarious position. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I don't think so. And I'm incredibly defensive about what I've been doing for the last 14 years or so. So, and also further to your point about whether it's real or not, this is definitely real, because Matt Hill publishes the numbers for all the people that are buying servers from them and, reports back what hits up the support, talks about the downloads from their marketplace of NOTs and core and stuff. No one is spending $800 a pop to buy a server to run Bitcoin NOTs to Sybil attack and make that number look bigger. They're authentic. This is not a Sybil attack. The NOTs nodes are genuine. And a couple of times they came out with some silly things about, Kala and people like that said there's only really 2% of the network running NOTs. The rest of them are all fake. And this was just completely dishonest, and we proved it was dishonest, and they never took it back. So, like Luke says, the gaslighting has been almost exclusively from the core side. It's just that people aren't ready to accept that because we have so much respect for people like Greg Maxwell and people like Kala, and they're legends in the space, and they've been utterly dishonest. And we've seen the motivated reasoning that they've engaged in and the personal attacks. And most of it, really, when the gloves come off, it's just hatred for Luke. It's just, some of it's just, we hate him because he's religious. Other stuff is we hate him because he's, impolite when he argues with us on GitHub and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, Aiden from Start9 proposed a new way of doing spam filters that he thought Core would really like. And he said, here's a way for us to make it not you guys' problem anymore. Just get rid of it from Core, and we'll do it with this config file that anyone can run from anywhere, and it doesn't need to become a part of a release cycle anymore. It's changeable, it's modular, so it's no longer a thing you guys have to worry about. And within 2 lines of the response, Greg Maxwell wrote, he's like, you guys want to stone people to death for fornicating? And just an unhinged rant about like religious values and authoritarianism and all that. And Aiden was like, are you serious? like, first off, I'm an agorist libertarian for the start, and second, I thought you would appreciate this. I thought you guys were sick of this drama. And so, like, generally what's going on here is you have a fall into disrepair of the culture around Bitcoin Core. And this is where I think I align with people that don't really agree with us on the risk here, like Jimmy, without putting words in your mouth, but sense that stuff isn't passing the smell test. There is obviously corruption that has crept into the reference client. There's obviously a change in values, and arguments are being made that don't stand up anymore. So all that stuff, you can take all this as emblematic and go, I don't care about 100 kilobyte op returns, but something stinks with core. If that is all you take from it, you're kind of half right. But I still will stand and die on the hill of the fact that we've gone a bridge too far with arbitrary file storage, and we're about to find out after having effed around.
Well, I still like you, Luke. I don't care what people say.
You still like who?
Luke,
I still like you, Luke. I don't care what people say.
Well, so I have a question about sort of the standardness versus consensus. So there are two things, and I think there's been some discussion, at least on Twitter, about how those two things should be more closely aligned. And if we're going to one person I think that talked about it was Hugo. He was talking about how that was kind of a mess up at the beginning, putting in standardness rules instead of like making standardness and consensus essentially the same. They separated those out. What are your guys' thoughts on that, and whether they should converge, or is like standardness just doing standardness enough? Or just want to get your thoughts on that, where you stand.
Just policy is enough and should be the way that we handle spam in general. It may not be enough for the CSAM problem. It's jury's still out on that one.
Yeah, that was the point where where I had to reevaluate things, because consensus allows 1 megabyte file storage. Like, it's not even 100 kilobytes; it's straight up 1 megabyte, a whole block of op return. I don't know that limiting that. I don't know if it makes sense to create a ridiculous hole in Bitcoin's consensus rules and then patch it up with policy and
hold on. Is the 520 byte limit not standardness thing? Can you have an arbitrarily large field in the witness field? I seem to remember that, but maybe not.
I mean, I was just talking about op return.
No, I know, but I think if you're not talking about standardness, you could have potentially a close to 4 megabyte contiguous thing within the witness. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Good point. I don't know. Luke, do you know?
I know, but I don't feel like answering it.
Okay, fair enough.
I
think that's an answer in itself, so we'll go with that. Okay.
I'm not going to give the bad actors new ideas.
Okay. And we have the 0.1 sat per vbyte thing that happened, and I wanted to get your guys' take on whether lowering that was first of all, is that a good thing or a bad thing right now? And if it's a bad thing right now, could it be a good thing in the future?
Hypothetically, I would say it could be a good thing, like if the community actually wanted to lower it, if miners are willing to accept lowering it. But in practice, it was really just spammers bypassing, direct submissions to pools, and there was a few people taking advantage of it for legitimate usage, but 99% of it was just spam. So in that respect, it's a bad thing.
Okay, and final question from me while Tone is still recovering is there's this whole thing about ephemeral anchors. Can you guys and Adam brought it up yesterday, and that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. Apparently, knots filter certain kinds of ephemeral anchor transactions. Can you guys explain what the actual controversy is, and what your answer to the people that are saying that are?
Knots allows the user ultimate control over their policies. You can disallow anchors. You can allow anything. You can allow more than core will ever allow, or even Liber Relay. I wouldn't encourage that necessarily, but you can do it. It's always up to the end user to decide those things. The default policy in Knots does allow ephemeral anchors, and that is actually useful for things like Lightning. So that seems like more or less an okay thing to do. The core one will force you to allow ephemeral anchors, but it also forces you to allow ephemeral dust, which means that there's a value on the anchor, and that has potential abuse cases by spammers and does not have any legitimate use cases. So Nuts does not allow that by default, but again, the end user makes the final call on that.
Yeah.
And I know Jimmy has to run in about 3 minutes, but I would love to stay on because, as Luke hinted at, because we are arguing over policy changes, we're arguing over, spam policy. There's no change in consensus with this. And as I, mentioned earlier, transactions with this stuff in it will now go through because there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Core is not gonna, reverse their view on version 30. And so going forward, what are your thoughts on a potential user-activated soft fork or a hard fork? And is that a bus you guys are willing to try and drive? That's a topic. Maybe we save it for another time if you guys want to come back on. I do want to address the smell test problem. A lot of people are now accusing, of a core being potentially, coerced by the authorities. But if I go back on screen share real quick, there's, by the way, I wanted to pull up the hash rate of Ocean. You guys are doing good. Congratulations. And the core's official statement, oh, that's not it. Core's official statement had all these names. So these are all the core developers that have, that are pro this change. Meanwhile, now the accusation is flying backwards that you guys over at Ocean, you guys have been coerced by the authorities. And the argument is, how the hell are the feds going to coerce all these people and versus, let's say, 2 or 3 people? And the final accusation, I would love you guys to address. There are rumors that the lawyers from Ocean are now reaching out to mining pools and kind of not threatening them, but informing them of the legal risk kind of as a potential scare tactic. So these were my final topics. I know Jimmy has to run. If you guys are willing to address all 3, maybe Jimmy can watch on the replay or we do another show. Ideally, you guys stick around 10, 15 more minutes as we talk about these 3 topics.
Can we do one at a time?
Yeah. Bye, Jimmy.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys. Bye.
Nice to see you, man.
Yeah. Good seeing you guys. Are you guys going to be in Lugano by any chance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll see you there then. Bye.
Right.
That's going to be fire. I won't be there, guys. Sorry.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'll be jet lagged as heck. Anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, I like the core statement with all those names on it because it's one of those instances where if they were right, they wouldn't have even had to write the thing in the first place. And the more names they could get on it, the more they could obfuscate the fact that their arguments don't make any sense. Ultimately, being coerced by the feds is not going to be a thing where we're pushed into a position to want to leave data carrier size where it's been for 16 years. That doesn't make any sense. So smell test, all I'm saying is leave it alone. Obviously, I've said a lot more than that with regard to filtering inscriptions and things like that. But like we said, there was only 1% NOTS adoption when we were pushing for filtering inscriptions. But leaving op return alone got 19% more of the network to say, yeah, this is ridiculous. So I'm sorry, Core's arguments don't stand up. And if you're looking for red flags around,
fundamentally the same
Sorry,
principle.
Repeat, Luke.
Filtering more new kinds of spam is also fundamentally the same principle that Bitcoin has been operating with. It's just updating the filters to actually continue working the way they have been.
I agree, but for the left of the bell curve people that are like, who wants a change and who wants to leave things alone, The recent controversy has been not pushing people to leave data carrier size alone. That is not Fed activity to leave Bitcoin in its functional state that it's been in, and having roaring
Look,
success for
I
years.
agree, Mechanic. I agree, right? This was one of my big pushbacks against that and back. Like why? Why are you guys pushing for a change that has now stirred up this controversy? Most Bitcoin maxis are against it. Why are you doing it? And unfortunately, Adam Back did not provide a very good answer. But last night, the answer was, well, this just makes no sense. The block still stays 1 MB. The spam shit is still going on, but it just now the spam part could happen in a different part of the transaction. And your main argument is, yes, but now the spam can happen in the main part of the transaction that potentially opens the protocol up to bad pictures. And are you willing to fork the blockchain over this?
Wait, we're talking about if we want to talk about forks, initially, I mean, the circumstances have changed. All I'm looking at now is op returns of 1 MB. You can limit them at the policy level and rely on centralized miners not routing around it, which actually worked really well. But that's obviously not going to work anymore because of Core 30 and the fact that it's getting some adoption. So is anyone using Bitcoin as money going to lament the consensus loss of 1 MB op returns? I don't think so. And I don't want to overstate it. Is anyone going to even lament the loss of 1 KB op returns? Is my hodl going to be undermined by limiting at the consensus level big op returns? I don't think so. I think they cause more harm than good. And I know the garbage can argument. Well, they'll just use, fake pub keys. Well, we still allow some. I don't think anyone is saying to fork out op return entirely, but to allow it to be 1 MB, a consensus seems crazy, but it wasn't crazy in a world where people would have non-retarded mempool policies. But now mempool policies are retarded, so we see the holes in consensus. So that's my advocacy for fixing it. So if people want to start pushing towards the soft fork to limit harmful ways the blockchain can be abused that aren't being filtered, I have absolutely no objection to them doing that, and I will probably.
So what's your solution for fixing this?
Luke wrote something on the mailing list last week, or probably 2 weeks ago now, and I didn't see really any objection to it. I think Keegan was like, "No, I want to have fun. This is undermining my ability as a developer to have lots of fun with new things we can add to Bitcoin."
That was in reply to someone else proposed an additional rule on top of what I posted.
I can barely hear you.
I didn't understand anything you said. You gotta speak into the mic. That was kind of like a mumble.
The one that was objecting, that Mechanic was saying was objecting, who's objecting to someone else's suggestion. As far as I've seen, there have been no objections whatsoever to the rules I proposed. So if we do go that route, I think we have basically consensus on how to do it. But I think you mentioned hard fork too, but there's no reason to even think about a hard fork. It's completely useless for this kind of thing.
Well, but you wouldn't need to. I mean, hard fork, soft fork, they're almost the same in this situation, right? I mean, if you're gonna, if anyone is advocating, I mean, I'm saying you guys are gonna advocate for a consensus rule change, right? It could be a very enthusiastic not believer would advocate for a consensus change and putting the filters in as a consensus protocol, not as a policy protocol, and then the drumbeat of soft or hard fork begin. Do you think it can be successful?
Soft fork, yes. Hard fork, no. The soft forks do not require the strict consensus that hard forks do.
I think it can be successful. There's the usual asymmetry that if there's like a 20-80% split, 20% This is a hypothetical because I don't have the delusion that 20% of miners are running knots, but if 20% of the network was mining the soft fork blocks and their chain was moving at 20% of the speed of the main chain, which dropped to 80%, the 80% gets very uncomfortable, because if the 20% ever grows to 51% and overtakes them, then they get wiped out. And that means the incumbent core chain would have to URSF, which is, making themselves a hard fork off of our soft fork, or just capitulate. And what are they capitulating to? Consensus limitation of a bunch of arbitrary data storage methods. I don't see anyone having a problem with that. There are some precedent things that maybe they don't want. Some people just abhor change to Bitcoin in general, leave it alone. I understand all these, heuristics, but at the same time, the nuts and bolts of it, I think even the way you described it was the way you wrote it, or at least the way you proposed it in the mailing list. I'm not going to say proposed, because then I'm going to get an article written about how we're proposing a fork. Just the ideas you were spitballing on. All they say is limit these known data carrying methods for the next couple of years, and then make them permitted again. So even if it causes some unknown issue, it's going to roll back. It's not a permanent limitation on those things. So to me, it seems I have no issue with it. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to start advocating for it strongly, but there are plenty of people that already are.
Okay, interesting. Luke, any comment on that before I ask a follow-up?
No, but I do want to elaborate more that soft forks and hard forks are necessarily very different. And while a hard fork needs the strict consensus, a soft fork can succeed even if it has a strong minority, as long as the strong minority is not outnumbered by people opposed to it. And who is going to oppose keeping child porn out of the chain? I doubt many people.
Again, emotional issue. I will agree with a part of that, saying back in the 2017 UASF, when that initiative began, there was almost zero miner support. And even towards the back end of UASF, miner support was nowhere near 20%. But people were so confident in what they believed, they were willing to let Bitcoin die, and the miners had no chance but to capitulate to the strong minority. Now,
miners never have control over protocol changes.
Correct.
Miners must follow the rules that the nodes define.
Correct. Now, in this particular case, right, it's hard to guarantee that the removal of the op return limit is actually more profitable for miners, right? It's an assumption that, hey, someone that wants to throw CSAM stuff into the protocol would be incentivized to pay so much money for a transaction that a miner is going to mine it. Plus, if all the nodes are relaying it, the miner is not even going to be incentivized to check what the content is. They're just going to process the transaction. Now, I will say at the moment, the mempool is empty, so it's easy to get anything into the freaking mempool, including getting this stuff in there now. No one is getting it in now. The biggest I guess the entity with the most incentive to stick some CSAM content into the Bitcoin protocol, other than a few trolls that we all know and love, would be like the US government itself to try and shut down Bitcoin. But I think it will fail, right? Just like you said earlier, the OPEC, or not OPEC, what was that acronym for? OFAC. Sorry, I'm thinking of oil. The OFAC mandate failed. And look, I'm not advocating for any kind of illicit content on the Bitcoin blockchain, but if it's there, I don't think anyone's going to be able to do anything about it. It's just there, right? Like, because it happened, it got in, and I don't think this removal of, even though I'm not happy about the removal of the op return limit, I'm not happy about it. I wish Core would, program less and to avoid these arguments, but it's there now. I just don't see.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is, Luke, because enough people are running v30 and all these transactions are going to go through, whether anybody likes it or not. They're going to go through it.
There is no circumstance where I'm going to have CSAM on any of my computers. I will stop using Bitcoin sooner.
I believe you, actually, and you're not going to run your node, and you're gonna you can do that, right? And you may have to try to fork and see if you can get consensus, but I don't see how that's going to be possible.
I don't think it should be that difficult. I mean, historically, we're spitballing here. It's going to be taken out of context, of course, but soft forks have happened. Soft forks that looked like they were doomed to fail until Luke pushed and got behind them, and then they succeeded. So if there's one guy that I would be like, I wouldn't have normally thought this would succeed, but if we had that guy, we'd probably manage it. It would be Luke. So if he's okay with it, then I think there's probably a decent chance that if we actually start putting some energy behind it, it could succeed. Because at the end of the day, it's a perfectly logical thing to do. I don't see anyone really having a problem with it. Someone commented in the chat, who's going to have a problem with this fork? Vitalik Buterin. He's going to think this is not okay and that this is censorship of other use cases, because that's what he said before and that's what he will say now. And it's going to be very revealing who agrees with that.
All right, so holy shit. I remember Jimmy and I doing videos every day about another soft fork. This one is gonna be I'm not saying it's going there, right? I'm not saying you guys are gonna launch the idea, but there's I'm smelling something in the air though. This is gonna be man.
No, well, it has a process, man. Like Portland proposed, limiting all outputs to 520 bytes, I think. And then Luke embellished it by saying, all right, we'll do these as well. And then no one on the mailing list cried about it. And now there's been loads of people on Twitter saying, let's just fork. And also, there've been loads of people on the core side that have been like, we don't like spam either, but we think filters are useless. You have to do it at the consensus level. So those people can come at me all day and say, we told you, if they want. I don't care. So to me, I don't really see there being a massive... I think the people that are going to hate it are the people that actually want to use big op returns. And those people are not Bitcoiners. They're doing something else. They're hijacking other people's computers to store their data because those other people are trying to engage in a monetary network permissionlessly. So I don't really see it being that much of an issue.
People who hate spam are going to support this kind of soft fork. People who hate filters are also going to support this kind of soft fork because they agree it needs to be done in consensus. So I think there's a good shot that the soft fork could actually happen at some point.
Right. Now, when you say people who hate filters, that could be seen as, oh, well, that's what removing the limit did. It eliminated the filter, right? So people that hate filters, maybe they're happy with no op return limit.
No, but they can... His point is about people that don't like filtering as a method of spam mitigation, but they're all right with consensus.
Right.
Some people just want consensus and filters to be the same. Some people just want
We'll
that.
see very quickly who actually hates spam but thinks filters don't work and who actually likes the spam.
Yeah, that's the differentiation.
So let's hypothesize for a minute. How would it look like, right? Like you're leaving the witness data, or you're gonna throttle that? You would not you. Okay. So if there is a soft fork initiative proposed, would it significantly throttle the the witness and pub key data? Is it just gonna put the op return back and saying this is how Bitcoin has always been? How would it look like? What would the limits be? What filters would now be moved into the consensus layer instead of the policy layer?
Well, Portland's original proposal to the mailing list was simply limiting outputs to 520 bytes, which is fundamentally flawed because you can have, you could put it in the witness like you mentioned. 520 bytes is probably still too big. You can still fit an image, a small image in that space. I think I managed to get just, throwing together a random image, I managed to get it down to 300 bytes and still be recognizable. So my follow-up to that was simply addressing each of the possible ways that you could realistically encode data and just saying, let's close these, let's make it. There's no reason an output should ever be more than 34 bytes at this point. So let's just make it the limit on the output to be 34 bytes. We can have an exception allowing op return up to 83 bytes. And then pretty much everywhere else that you could hide data, limit them to 256 bytes. That's, a 2048-bit number. Plenty for cryptography, the actual legit use cases. And we just make it expire. My proposal would have been a year. Some people are saying 2 years now. And that would mean that no matter what goes wrong, if it turns out to be too limiting, too restrictive in a way that's not expected, we just address it in a year and there's no long-term harm done. It's not like a permanent soft fork like most, I guess pretty much everyone in the past has been, that we can't fix the issues in. And there's probably better ways to do some of it, but the ways that I was suggesting are very simple, very easy to review the code, something that could be done in in a very short time period. And if someone comes up with a better way to do it in a year, when this one expires, we could do that instead.
Right. So let's play it a little bit further, right? This is I know you didn't like when I said it on yesterday's podcast, but one of the reasons why I always trusted Core, less so today than in years past, was their diversity of developers that I considered, smart and, a nice collective of enough smart minds that had Bitcoin's best, thoughts in mind. You were part of that pretty much at that point. And in this case, and again, this was my argument against the Bcachers forking off. Like, who's going to develop your chain? You got maybe one or two guys that know how to code well, but no one trusts them.
I mean, the last thing I want to
There's
do
no
is
one
defend.
there.
The last thing I want to do is defend Bcash, but I mean, one of their devs found the inflation bug in Bitcoin, and
Sure.
but also there was a hard fork. It's a completely different thing. A hard fork is usually straight up kamikaze suicide, right? Soft forks have a way different dynamic because if you get some adoption, it makes sense for everyone to join, unless it's really, really, really contentious, and then they will URSF to make sure they don't risk wipeout. But that's it's a different dynamic.
Yes, I agree, right? But one of the
but
things.
Also,
Sorry, go ahead, Luke. Go ahead, Luke.
Bitcoin Knots and Bitcoin Core draw pull requests from the same pool of development community. It's not like Bitcoin Knots doesn't have the same developers writing code. There is certainly some risk that having a smaller group of developers could be problematic if like all the core developers stop developing, but that I don't think that's going to happen. Even if core dies, the developers will just switch to Knots or another implementation. It obviously was not good to have core be a single implementation almost everyone used. It would not be good for Knots to become that in the future. We need to move to a more diverse system where nobody has, the whole network running the same software. So there is that. I believe there's at least one other person working on that. I don't know how soon their software will be ready, and even if we want to say like a smaller group would be easier to compromise, as you were saying earlier, there is that risk, and I don't want to be put in the position where I don't want the feds to suddenly come to me because I have too much influence over the network. That would be terrible for me, terrible for the network. But there's also the point that core is already compromised, and a potential to compromise is still less bad than actual compromised already, which core is. So,
that's true. But go ahead. Sorry.
Hopefully, as Knots grows, more developers will switch over their focus. obviously, like I mentioned, we're still pulling from developers who aren't focused on knots, but hopefully at some point more developers will switch their focus to knots as core dies off. And hopefully in the long run, in the next few years, a second and third implementation will be developed so that knots doesn't get in this position that's going to be risk becoming just another core and going the same route.
All right. Yeah, I think that would be a necessary component. You guys would have to get some devs to migrate over. And again, when I say you, I don't literally mean you. The Knots initiative would
I mean, to
certainly
be
need.
clear, there's already lots of devs working on knots and focused on knots even. But obviously more is always better.
And but again, since I joined into this, try to understand what is happening. I'm getting, messages from both sides. Rumors are just like there's accusations of Bitcoin Core already being compromised. There are similar rumors to, Ocean being compromised as well. Just so you're aware, these rumors are swirling around
They are.
on that front as
Like I
well.
said, Ocean is not even involved in this. Ocean doesn't have a role to play. Miners make their own blocks on Ocean. This is
Can we
completely unrelated to Ocean.
Can we jump on that topic real quick with
Sure.
with miners mining their own knots on Ocean? I did read this article by Shinobi, and he accuses Ocean of a couple of things, and I would love it for you guys to address it. One of his claims is that while the Bitcoin knots, Bitcoin, sorry, not Bitcoin knots, Ocean, and again, I'm a fan of Ocean, right? I'm loving what you guys are doing.
Yeah,
You chose
go ahead.
to create a datum protocol instead of using Stratum v2 in order for miners to put together their own templates to decide which transactions go into a block. And Ocean is almost 2 years old. I was there in January for the launch of last year, so that's coming up. Datum, that it's still not open source, and some people are kind of upset about
Yes, it
that.
is.
There's two
No,
parts.
Datum's open source.
Datum
It's
has been open source since day one.
yeah. We published the source code 2 weeks after we launched Datum.
So is he
And that was the
lying
first
and
time
started?
anyone
Is
had access to
Shinobi
it.
He's
is Shinobi
yes.
being disingenuous?
Simply put, he's
Shinobi
lying.
is just a
But
Is
bad
he lying?
actor lying. Everything he
He-
says practically these days is a lie.
Yeah, it's really look, man. Shinobi is an old friend of mine. I still maintain hope that he stops with this ridiculous, negativity and disingenuousness. But Datum's an open source protocol. The gateway code is out there. The aspect of the pool that the Ocean side of things is Datum Prime. That's not sitting on GitHub anywhere yet. It's going to be. No one needs it. The spec is out there. People can use Datum. Any other pool can support Datum if they want. It's there. It's available for people to use. I don't know it's MIT licensed or whatever. I don't know what his central claim in this article is, but what can you tell me specifically what it is that he's saying we're hypocrites about? Because that seems to be what you're driving at. And I haven't read the article. So what is the allegation?
All right, I can play this real quick. It'll read it on fast speed. The allegation is that you guys chose to create your own protocol instead of just using Stratum v2. It is not open sourced, and also it makes it very challenging for miners to just jump off from your pool. That's how it read to me. So, firstly, developers have been working on Stratum v2, a replacement for Stratum v1 protocol. This has been a massive project. Blocks. There's v2.
If we waited for Stratum v2, we would still be waiting today. We didn't want to wait. And if they finally come out with something usable, we'll support it too.
Right. So here he says you guys have pledged to make it open source, but you have not. And it says in both situations, pool operator is capable of rejecting propose blocks from individual
That's a
miners.
lie. That's a straight up lie. We cannot do anything. If a miner makes a block, they publish it directly to the network. They don't use us as a middleman. There's nothing we can do about that. So he's just straight up lying there. Every
mean,
data
a
mine
lot of
block
this is
goes
straight
from
up
the
lie.
data miner to the Bitcoin network. There is no middleman. We cannot censor blocks. The most we can do is mess with people's payouts, which is just, and it would be utterly transparent if we did, but that's nothing to do with decentralized mining.
Yeah, that's just a matter of fraud in contracts and stuff. It's the
Okay.
same as if you do work for someone and they don't pay you.
Okay. And his other claim is you're somehow inhibiting Lightning channels from closing, hence undermining Bitcoin's use as money in layer 2.
We already addressed
more
that. That's the
lies.
ephemeral anchors
Yeah.
thing.
Okay. I just needed to bring that up and get your comments on that. Other than that, yeah, the only other part is accusations of Ocean Team reaching out to other miners, to miners in general, and again, informing them of all the legal risk. And I'm pretty sure that whoever said you guys are threatening legal action, that seems ridiculous. Even I didn't believe that. But in general, any comments from that people have about the Ocean team and the lawyers from Ocean reaching out and having these types of discussions with miners in order to, get hash rate for the Ocean mining pool.
It would not help us get hash rate, first of all. That seems pretty obvious, and obviously I post a lot on Twitter, especially about these topics. So yeah, I mean, I reach out to everyone giving good advice. So that's true, in the sense that it's all public. I don't necessarily, call up individual miners or whoever to tell them about legal risks. I just post it for everyone on the internet to see.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's me personally. That's not Ocean.
there's nothing that's happened
and,
in any private conversation that we haven't made clear for the world to see. So no one's threatening legal action against other miners or anything. That's insane. I don't know if that's, I don't want to knock down a straw man. Is that literally the claim, that we've threatened legal action against other miners? Because we absolutely have not done that.
That one I'm pretty sure was bullshit. Like I said, even I didn't take that seriously. But just general reaching out and discussing the legal implications of miners, grabbing these blocks with large op return data sets is something that is more believable as potentially has happened.
Yeah, I mean, if we're feds, first off, we made it so that miners can make their own blocks, which is the least fed thing ever, because we don't have control over what goes in Ocean blocks. And what feds would want is the opposite. They would want the current model where the pool gets to where the pool gets to choose what goes in blocks. And fundamentally, what we're pushing for is not some authoritarian thing, as Greg Maxwell keeps saying. Nodes should just relay what they want to relay, and that's that's perfectly congruent with all libertarian principles. I definitely don't want to relay spam around the network, and I don't want to mine it. I accept that other people can do it, but I don't think it's in their interest to do it.
Right. And we'll continue spreading the word that it's not in their interest to do it. But I think at this point, as we kind of got to eventually at the end, the only way to stop it might be soft fork. And I'm going to keep an eye on the situation. And if it's trending in
Are you going to monitor the situation?
I'm going to be monitoring the situation. And if it's trending towards the user activated soft fork, I will need you guys back on here again to explain it.
All right. Well, it'll be the first time. If it ends up going down that route and it fails, it'll be the first time it failed, because we did SegWit, we did Taproot. It was always the same. It was a dream team.
I'm gonna contradict that, because BIP 17 kind of failed.
All right. Well,
Which one
Luke,
was that?
for the I don't even know what that was. Do you want to tell me?
There were three pay to script hash proposals back in 2012, 2013, somewhere around there, and only BIP 16 out of the three was eventually adopted. BIP 17 and BIP 12 were rejected in the end. But this was before the whole concept of minor activated soft forks and stuff.
All right. I'm ready to leave it here unless you want to, close out on some final thoughts. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and I will probably do another part or two on this. We'll try to bring on maybe some miners and get their thoughts on the situation. I think that would be a great stream.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks for having us, man. And it's fun to be back on. It's been a few years, I think.
Yeah. Hope you guys, challenging questions, but no one should expect anything less from this channel.
No, it's all good. Appreciate you as always, man.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. I will send me any links you want me to post in the video description, and I'm gonna update those now with like the link to Ocean Mining Pool and like some of the other stuff.
We'll send them. Cheers, man.
All right, bye guys. Luke, thanks for joining. I know you're not a fan of these of these guys' streams, but awesome, appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon someday.
Yeah, good to see you again.
All right, bye guys.